Hello, I'm Michael Davison from IBM Global Business Services, working in the United Kingdom out of our UK headquarters at London South Bank. Complex services lies at the heart of IBM's business. We have moved from being an information technology company to a company where globally more of our revenues come from the delivery of technical and business services than actually for hardware and software. This is a major shift, and the interesting thing is we're still finding out how to do it ourselves. And because we advise our clients who are themselves work in complex services businesses as well as manufacturing, we have decided to join the Cambridge Service Alliance. The Cambridge Service Alliance is a tripartite arrangement of research and academic and business interests between Cambridge University, IBM, and
BAE Systems.
We are the first two corporate partners to the Cambridge Service Alliance, and the alliance will grow over time to become a confederation of leading and innovative enterprises. The heart of the Cambridge Service Alliance is asking complex questions about complex services. And I'm delighted to introduce Ivanka Visnjic, who's the lead researcher and project manager for one of the pieces of research around business model innovation for services. We have two other complementary research programs, which are around service support and engineering and performance information and analytics. Ivanka, welcome. Services, why are they so important in a developed economy?
Thank you, Michael. Well, firstly, I think it's important to notice that services became more than 2/3 of our GDP, especially in developed Western economies. Now, there's two ways of looking at it, really two schools of thoughts of why this is the case and what it actually means. So on one side, you could think of the advent of services to be a good sign, where developed Western economies are moving towards more advanced forms of economic activities, leaving commoditized manufacturing activities to the other markets. However, there is another way to interpret the rise of services, and that is the lack of productivity. So there is a so-called phenomena of Baumol's cost disease, where relative rise of services in comparison to manufacturing can be seen as a consequence of lower productivity and higher labor intensity of services as compared to the manufacturing and product economies. And indeed, if we look at manufacturing and what has shaped manufacturing in the last 2 or 5, even 5 decades, we have seen a lot of product innovation technologies pushed towards lean and process innovation. Whereas in service sectors such as education, healthcare, we have seen relatively less innovative activities and practices. However, that I would say is not the end, but only the beginning of an interesting story, because over the last 2 decades, the advent of IT is starting to significantly shape service economy. There are two notable trends. First, the digitalization of services. So if we look at the business model that arose around internet, if we think of the most interesting examples that everyone is familiar with, such as Amazon or Expedia or more recently Academic Earth. These are all business model innovation that happened in retail that reshaped completely the nature of retail, of bookstores, or in travel and hospitality sector, basically by alleviating expensive infrastructures. Today, you just go to PayPal and you pay almost inexpensively any transaction to someone else on the other side of the world.
As opposed to using a bank where it might cost you maybe 6 or 7 times as much in fees.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
The second and more interesting trend in IT that is happening right now is around the instruments and instrumentalization of the economy. So digitalization of services has had mostly impact on consumer-oriented services. It couldn't have a significant and profound impact on services that are asset intensive and that rely on heavy physical infrastructures such as energies, utilities, and so on and so forth. However, instruments such as sensors, RFID technology, mobile phones help us to capture the data and to construct information flows around these materials and economical activities to understand them better and to navigate them and guide them in a more effective way.
So can you give us an idea of how rapidly this growth in data is occurring?
Yes. So I think that the best example would be to consider transistors. There were about 60 million transistors in 2001 per one person. In 2010, which is the latest figure that we have, there is about 1 billion of transistors per person. Transistor is very important because it's basically a building block of the digital economy. So that is just one of the examples. RFID technology, RFID tags progressed from about 1 billion in 2005 to pretty much 30 billion of RFID tags last year.
So you're suggesting then that there's been an exponential growth in instruments which gather data. That doesn't answer a question as such, does it? That's just data. What do you need to do to the data to answer the sorts of questions that complex service enterprises need?
That's a very good point, Michael. So data and technology merely represents the potential that we have. One study that actually IBM did shows that there is about 13 trillion of potential for annual savings on annual basis that can be reaped from understanding and using that data in a better way. But what is business doing to take advantage of that potential is another question. So I would like to take a look back at the 20th century and how businesses were making use of the technology and trends that existed in that economic environment. So our business gurus and management ideas from the 20th century were mainly based around focus on core competencies, understanding of the industry dynamics. Porter's 5 forces comes to mind. Value chain analysis comes to mind as well. When we look at the business environment that underlies this management idea, we see the tendency of firms to diversify or to focus, the importance of lean and business process modeling, and then the one layer underneath of that are the technology trends that basically dictate the business environment, which are mainly surrounding technology that is packed in product innovation. So new forms of transportation, better cars, pharmaceutical industry. That was the nature of the economic dynamics in the 20th century.
And we're now looking forward into the 21st. So where is the white space around this stuff?
So the white space starts when you consider the change in the technological environment. Today we are seeing the technological trends, the IT, the level of interconnectedness that we have never seen before. Okay. This ultimately shapes the potential and the nature of the business relations that can exist in the environment. We see a shift from products to service activities as the unit of the exchange. We see different types of business phenomena. Instead of diversification or make or buy problems, vertical integration or disintegration. Today we see more and more business models innovation, the change in how firms operate, fundamental change in how firms operate.
Mm-hmm. So what is the sort of useful unit of analysis? If it's not the firm, what is it? Is it a supply chain or an environment, or what is it?
So going back to the business model and business model innovation basically represents a fundamental change in the way that firm designs its value proposition, delivers it, or captures the value from the value that it creates. However, the important facet of the business models is that the focus becomes the ecosystem that surrounds the firm, and the unit of the analysis is no more just the firm as a single entity, but a whole countless interactions that it has with multiple economic agents that exist in its environment.
Okay, so you're drawing a distinction, it seems to me, between the idea of an environment, but particularly between an ecosystem and a supply chain. So just unpack that for us. What is a supply chain, and how does an ecosystem really differ?
So the notion of supply chain is somewhat linear. You have supplier side or the input side, and you have the customer side or the output side. What we are seeing in the service economy that is getting formed today is that the nature of the economic interaction is nowhere near as linear as that. We see more and more co-creation where customer holds an active role in the value delivery. So we have much more interactions. We have much more feedback loops than linear value chain type of flow from the supplier to the customer side. There is also an extension of the number of economic agents that basically influence the way that firm delivers value and how much value it captures. So, for example, if we have regulators, customers are very complex. So you cannot think of a customer no more as a single entity, but as a number of institutions that one customer comprises of.
Okay, so this is an interesting set of developments where you're giving us a very clear view that the science of services, if you like, or this research area is relatively underdeveloped, where the technologies and their impacts are even now emerging and are starting to be understood. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So with that in mind, we've set out on a multi-year research journey, and we are only in the first year of that. Okay, and I'd be interested if you could just give us a feel for the kinds of firms that you've chosen to research, supported by IBM and BAE Systems, and from that initial tranche of research, whether there are any themes that are starting to emerge.
So our first wave of research centers around the most complex among the complex service providers. So we are looking at the asset-heavy service systems that rely on complex infrastructure, energy sector, utilities, telecoms, IT sectors, regional and local systems such as cities and regions. So these are basically the ecosystems that we are looking into, and we are trying to have at least 2 case studies within each of these ecosystems to understand the dynamics that exist within the ecosystem and how different players are shaping their business models within those ecosystems.
Okay, and so have you looked only in, for example, in public sector or private sector organizations, or by converse, are you looking at asset-heavy service businesses right across the spectrum of sectors?
We are looking across the spectrum of sectors. So, and this is an inherited difference in the industrial analysis that was more prominent in the 20th century, and the ecosystem analysis that we are trying to look today. So we are not comparing different automotive manufacturers. what we are doing is we are looking at the ecosystem, such as, for example, rail transportation, trying to understand who is responsible for manufacturing of the train, who owns the train, who operates the train, who is the customer, who regulates the sector, who sets the rule in the sector. So all these dynamics of different interconnected entities that jointly deliver service, the seemingly simple service, such as transportation with train from point A to point B to the residence.
Okay, and so with that in mind, you've used the example of train, the provision of a train. Could you just give us an idea of the sorts of themes that have started to emerge from your initial tranche of research?
Yes. So firstly, what we see is that ecosystems, the nature of the ecosystem, and the role that a single firm plays within the ecosystem significantly determine their potential to innovate their business models and to reap the benefits of it. So, for example, there are ecosystems that are highly regulated, where a regulator or key customers, dominant customer, has most power in the relationship. Whereas there are more competitive ecosystems, or even ecosystems where suppliers have more power over customers. Secondly, we see differences amongst the between the positions that the firm can take. Prime supplier or the integrator of the complex service has most potential to develop and to innovate the business model and to dictate the surrounding firms how to shape their business models. Sub-suppliers or partners are less able to do so. However, irrespective of firms' potential to innovate their business model, we see two maneuvers that firms are using to compete with business models. So firstly, we see a trend of firms to go towards provision of more complex services, to provide comprehensive solutions that are fitting into the client's business models. So more client-oriented service solutions. There are more or less three ways that firms are looking to do that. First, they extend the scope of services. So take an example of logistics consultancy, going from warehousing to the provision of all services involved into the supply chain management would be an example. Second example is a move from providing service as a process to providing service as an outcome, which is best example could be found probably in complex asset, engineered asset. Everybody's, I think, familiar today with Rolls-Royce. So moving from provision of engines and maintenance on the engines to providing that service as an outcome, as a power by the hour outcome is a shift from process to an outcome. So
let's just get that really clear then. So you're telling us now that Rolls-Royce, which makes very complicated jet engines for aircraft, actually price those as a continuous service through time rather than selling the engine. Is that right?
Indeed. Okay. So instead of delivering a piece of machinery and a service of a maintenance over time, what is provided is actually an outcome, a capability that piece of machinery and the accompanying service delivers.
So you've set out two of the three now. We have a broader scope, the move towards what I might call a turnkey solution.
Yes.
Where you're providing a lot more value, a value bundle to a client in terms of a set of services as opposed to a single service. And then you've set out the dematerialization of products into services as outcomes. What's the third one?
The third one is a temporal dimension of it. So in addition to providing more services and services as outcomes rather as processes, firms do that over extended periods of time. So today we are talking about contracts of 20 years to provide train capability that is charged for per daily basis. That is a significant step in terms of planning, in terms of the value proposition. We find that is a tremendous achievement, and a big risk as well for the provider.
So, I guess if these are the trends that are starting to emerge from this first tranche of research, there must be particular skills or competencies that these companies are starting to have to develop, whether consciously or, in a sense, unconsciously or by accident. Is that right? And if so, what sorts of competencies and skills are you starting to observe?
So that's a very good point, actually. So while we are seeing that most firms are interested to move towards more complex solutions, we see that some are more successful in it than others. What underlies this difference in achievement is actually the difference in institutional capability, in the capability to understand client's business model and to adapt the value proposition towards client's business model. So it's not only the understanding of what client needs, but it's also the understanding of how that should be delivered. What are the key institutional actors on the client side? Who holds the power? What are the time frames that client is reacting to? There we see significant differences. For example, we talked to two facility maintenance firms, whereas one adapted its business models completely to the local councils and achieved tremendous success, whereas the other was trying to sell the capabilities, their own capabilities to different markets, and
with
struggled.
Less success and struggled.
Okay. Yes.
And is that the key finding, or are there other findings as well? You've talked about institutional skills, client-facing skills.
Yes. So that is one maneuver. So the extension of the value proposition. What we see, on the other hand, around the trend that we see concerning the delivery of that value proposition is different. Instead of moving towards the broader delivery, that one would think is an intuitive consequence of designing the broader solution, yes. Firms are actually restructuring their value delivery and looking to leverage more and more partner networks and the ecosystems in the better way.
Right. So how does that differ then from a supply chain? Because I could say, well, I know any business has got service partners. They are its suppliers to produce the final outcome. What's different here?
The difference is the level of complexity, right, and the strategic nature of the partners. So firstly, we see two different partnerships being conceived. On one side, firms are entering in partnership where they can leverage the competency of their partners. And on the other hand, we see that firms are entering in partnerships where they can leverage the cost effectiveness of downstream markets. The reason why it becomes more complex is because of the intangible nature of services. So pushing the risk to the downstream to the customers becomes to the suppliers and to the partners becomes an art. We have seen recently in UK several, well, I would say, challenging situations where in rail transportation sectors, Network Rail faced large penalties for the accidents that can be associated with what was related to the mismanagement of the partners.
I see. So there are real consequences to getting this wrong, as well as economic upsides to getting it right. That's what you seem to be saying.
Yes, because of especially because of the temporal nature. So it is impossible to treat partners as in transactions ecosystem needs to be grown. It needs to be considered over a period of time, the effects that it will produce as well.
So you're painting a picture then where a complex service business is, in a sense, at the heart of its own constellation of suppliers, the thing that you call an ecosystem. And you're setting up a proposition that says it has to manage lots of risk, more complex actors over time. Is that right?
Yes.
And if so, what have you observed about their ability to do that?
Okay, so maybe I can take an example to portray that picture. So, for example, if we think about a train, the value proposition of a train is pretty much there is one-to-one relationship with the value delivery. Design of train, manufacturing, delivery of train, and value proposition is achieved. If we think of a complex service solution, such as a contract for train capability over 20 years, besides the design, manufacturing, and delivery, firm needs to firstly provide a number of other activities, such as maintenance, painting, design of the depots, management of the depots. Probably needs to leverage partners that are more capable in providing bits and pieces of that complex service offering. Train manufacturers are not experts in construction, for example. However, there is still a big gap between the value proposition and the value and the suite of service activities that go on, because and the difference is something that we would refer to as accountability spread.
Right.
So what firm actually sells when it sells train capability for 20 years comprises additionally of a number of risks associated with operational risk to deliver the service, partner risk for partners to deliver the service, performance risk that service will be delivered with certain characteristics such as availability of the trains and reliability of the trains. Further, there is an element of risk of retained ownership. It's the train manufacturer now that retains the ownership. The risk of understating the residual value or misvaluing residual value. And all that risk also has its dynamic component because you can multiply it with the uncertainty of 20 years. So this accountability spread is something that firms have to pay significant attention to. And here again, we are seeing differences among firms, to what extent they're aware and able to manage the accountability spread. Relying on client institutional skills to extend value proposition and grow, as well as relying on the partner skills to manage the bottom lines, can help achieve competitive advantage. However, sustainability of that competitive advantage can be achieved only if supplier is able to manage accountability spread, to collect the data, to assess the level of risk, and also to put in place mechanisms and activities to mitigate that risk.
Ivanka, thank you.
Thank you.
This research is complex, it's multi-year, and we are at an early stage. We're delighted to be able to announce that we will be writing up our first tranche of research in a white paper, which will be launched in September of 2011 at the Industry Cambridge Service Alliance Services Week. And we will be publicising this more extensively via the Cambridge Service Alliance nearer to the time. For more information about the Cambridge Service Alliance, please go to cambridgeservicealliance.org or contact me personally, michael.davison@uk.ibm.com. Thank you.